my name is Amy Bond. I am the acting manager of policy and outreach at Community Gaming Grants. Now, I've been with the program for, I want to say 7 years. I was in another position in government working in gaming before I came over here. That was in 2016, and I've moved around quite a bit in the program. So I've worked as a grant analyst looking at your applications. I've been a supervisor of staff, I've been a policy analyst, and now currently I'm managing the policy department and doing the outreach. So that's been really wonderful. I honestly, don't really want to move to another area of government because we get to give money to not-for-profits, which is pretty awesome. So what I will show you guys today is an overview of the Community Gaming Grants program. We'll talk a little bit about the eligible structure to apply for a grant. We'll go over the financial components. We'll go over how to apply for a program. And then I do have other slides. If you guys have questions about like how to spend the grant funds or reporting, I can go over that or I can leave it. So I'll just check in with you when we get to that point. I would like to acknowledge that today I'm coming to you from the lands of the Lekwungen speaking people, who are known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, also known as Victoria. I thank them for their stewardship of the land, on which I'm grateful for the opportunity to live and work and connect with my community and participate in acts of ongoing reconciliation in my work and my personal life. I think that the attendees here today are probably all around in different areas. So I invite you, if you're moved to throw in the chat whose traditional land you're coming from. So a little overview about community gaming grants. We are community-driven programs is what we fund. It's not government-identified initiatives. We have a $140 million annual budget. 135 million of that goes to these ongoing programming grants, and 5 million of that is designated for a capital projects program. So our regular grants, how we started back in 2010, is for ongoing programs. It's not a competitive grant at all, so all eligible applicants receive funding at some level. We have about a 90% success rate in it. I have to update these. I see the average grant amount has gone up from 25,000 in 2020. I think it was up to 28, the high end of 28,000 last year. There's almost 5,000 applicants every year for community gaming grants, so it's a really high volume program. And we do fund organizations all across the province in every region. So the programs that we fund are in many different sectors, many different kinds of programming. We break these out into 6 funding sectors. This just helps us organize our sector intakes and helps us to track funding to different sectors. So I've just listed them all here to show you a little general description of what they are and what their intake is. I will say most of these, most youth programs apply in the human social services sector, which is the one that's currently open right now. So it opens August 1st and closes November 30th. And I won't spend too much longer on those. I'll just say the other thing about sectors is, I just said it. Most of the youth organizations apply in there. They can also apply under another sector when their programming is specifically related to that. So some of the examples is we get the Army, Air, and Sea Cadets apply, Navy League, Junior Rangers. We get Scouts and Guides programs, Young Naturalists Club, 4-H clubs. So sometimes the Young Naturalists apply in this sector, sometimes they apply in environment. We've had 4-H clubs apply in environment or arts and culture. Most apply under human social services. We get some of these Lego clubs and other STEM clubs, that kind of thing. We have had around 20 4-H councils that have successfully applied for funding over the years. It has gone down, I think, to about 6 since the pandemic first hit us. Grant amounts can range from anywhere from $2,000 up to $18,000. And that amount that they get funded is directly related to the amount of youth that are participating and the total costs to run the program. So that's all included in the application. And then I just listed some applicants that I've noticed that they've come in multiple years or for a long time. So if you know anyone from there and you're wondering how to apply, they might be good to talk to. All right, so eligibility, what kind of structure do you need? So you have to be a not-for-profit. That means your primary purpose is to operate for community benefit. So you do not have to be a registered charity or a society or legally set up that way, but you have to have a mandate or a constitution and bylaws or equivalent documents that are set up for assessment purposes. The grant analyst will look at those to see what your purpose is, that it is not for purpose of gain, and that you meet the other structural criteria. Those are that you actually deliver programs or services in your community. Open membership, so reasonably open membership. Most people who want to join are able to, so that, and if there is any restrictions, there should be sort of a reason for it. Volunteer board members. So this is more than double the number of voting members. The board members is to make sure that you can actually have a democratic process. So if you have 5 board members and 6 people electing them, there's never going to be turnover, right? So you have to have more than double. That's the reason for that. So those board members, 2/3 of them at least have to live in BC. So you can't have your board outside of the province, or at least not more than 1/3 of them. The board does not receive remuneration, or they're not paid for their services as a board member. I will just note that youth can be elected. We don't have any rules around that. And there are exceptions, like if you have an appointed director or someone who needs to be paid for specific circumstances, that may be allowed on a case-by-case basis. So an appointed director shouldn't be permanent, like you should still be able to switch them out for someone else. And you shouldn't have more than 1/3 of the total board be appointed. Again, that's to make sure that someone who's appointed for whatever reason doesn't have control over the board, that you have that grassroots level of civic engagement where people who are invested in the organization can still have a say and they can vote in what board they want or vote out a board that they don't want. A paid director, if you do need to pay someone, we've seen this with treasurers sometimes where you need someone with an accounting background and they're paid, they can't be paid with their gaming grant funds. So, and if you do fall under any of those, we may ask for justification for it. What is the reason? And we'll usually accept a written justification as long as it's reasonable. So who is not eligible for a grant? Well, it will be any for-profit organizations, businesses, partnerships, that kind of thing. Member-funded society, I'll just go over what that is. Member-funded society is a legal term under the Societies Act. It does not mean that you take registration fees or that you're funded by your members. You have to vote, do a special resolution to become a member-funded society. And what it means is that, well, you're not eligible for most types of government funding, but also when you wind up, you can actually distribute your assets and your cash to the members. So that's why it's not eligible for government funding, but it is a legal term there. Political parties, we don't fund any kind of political action groups or lobby groups. We don't fund any level of government at all, or any kind of government facilities and services, so like hospitals, schools, even like a municipal library or museum. We will fund the not-for-profit ones, but not if it is run by the local government. We don't fund professional or industry associations who primarily serve their membership with occupational programming. And we don't fund religious institutions. I'll just add a bit there. There are many organizations that run alongside religious institutions as nonprofits, and those are fine when they meet the other criteria, like having an open membership and an elected board. We just find the institutions themselves usually don't have that structure. So program eligibility. So we're pretty broad in how we define a program. It's an ongoing service, activity, or series of activities. We do fund on a program basis. So this is what we're looking for on the application, is there will be a program description. We're looking to see that the program is currently running at the time of the application. It has to be ongoing. So we don't fund a project with a set start and end date, but something that is, you go on, year to year, and it's something that's delivered by the applicant. It should show community benefit, so responsive to a community's needs, accessible and inclusive, which just means no unnecessary restrictions. It's great to tell us about anything extra that you do to make it accessible. And providing an immediate service to the community. So ineligible programs are things delivered on a contract or under a funding agreement. Those are typically like healthcare or counseling services, sometimes funded through government, could be otherwise. But if it's not, if you're delivering a program on behalf of someone else, that's what that is. It's not to do with hiring contractors. Solely operating a facility, so just having a hall or having a building that you keep open is not a program in itself. It's the activities happening within that building. Financial assistance to individuals is not a program. Sometimes you can offer sliding scales for registration fees to make things more accessible. That's a demonstration of community benefit, but just giving specific things like gift cards or money to people, that in itself is not an eligible program. We don't support vocational training or any kind of career programming, just because there's other ministries that do a really great job of that, and we don't need to also fund it. Fundraising or social enterprise programs. So if the activity is being done so that you can raise money, then we're not going to fund that, but we'll fund the activity that you're also trying to fundraise for. So what are you raising funds for? Selling goods or food to participants. So again, a lot of times that is fundraising, just hidden a little bit. If your program is benefiting other organizations, but not people individually, like directly, then it's not eligible. So I don't know that 4-H has many of those to worry about. How do you describe a program? So we have this table right in our guidelines that goes over this: who, what, when, where, how. It's really good to hit all of these and try to do it really clearly and concisely, probably no more than 2 pages at maximum. So who benefits? Like, do you have youth from 6 to 18? How many of them? Right? What are the program activities? What are all the different things they do throughout the year? When do the programs run? Is it weekly, monthly, seasonal? Where can be important sometimes. If you travel a lot to run your program, or if you have to maintain a facility to deliver it in, there could be costs incurred with both of those that would be good to know about. How you can talk again about that accessibility. You can also talk about if you have staff delivering it, if you have volunteers, how is it rolled out. So these are all things you can put in the program description. We are now also considering programs that have been delivered for less than a full year. So if you have just started doing your programming and it hasn't been a whole year, you can still apply. We ask for a little bit more. include a plan for the ongoing delivery. So basically convince us this is going to keep going past the year that you start it, and demonstrating capacity to do it is just showing that you've got other funding streams coming in. And address how it will meet an identified need. So that would be in the program description. Tell us why you're starting it. So this is how most of the 4-H applications I've seen apply. This is an example of one eligible program. Because our funding is program-based, there's a couple of different ways organizations can apply. In this example, the organization delivers one program. All of their activities that they do all year fall under this one program. So they send in one program description and one set of program actual revenues and expenses, which may be the same as their overall organization financials. In the second example, this organization has 3 separate, very discrete, unique programs. So the art gallery is very different from a folk festival, which is again very different from youth art lessons and kids camps. They're aiming to serve different groups of people. They have different revenues coming in and probably some different costs. So they'll need to apply for those all as separate programs within the application. If you have this, we can, you can apply on a program basis too. I usually just see overall programming for 4-H, like a year of programming. But if you're doing really separate things, you may want to consider that. So talk a bit about the financials. We have 2 main financial policies. One is for the organization as a whole. It's what's called financial need. And the other is for program financial eligibility. So the one you may have heard about if you've applied for gaming before is what we call our surplus policy. This is how we determine financial need. So the slide here says an organization is temporarily ineligible to receive a grant if it has more than 50% of the previous year's expenses on hand in unrestricted funds. What that means is if at your fiscal year end you have enough money in the bank that's not restricted, it's totally available for you so that you could operate and do all of your programming for 6 months without getting a grant, without doing any fundraising, without getting any registration fees, that you could do that. That's where the line in the sand is half a year. You could fully operate with no money coming in for half a year. And if you could go beyond that, then it doesn't demonstrate financial need. I'll show you an example on the next slide of example financial statements and where we look. But basically, we're looking at the assets. We're taking your current assets only, cash and investments, and we'll subtract things like any gaming funds that are in the account, all of your current liabilities, any restricted funds, deferred revenue, and then it just gets divided by the overall operating expenses. So on this example one, you can see the balance sheet on this side. We're looking at the cash in the bank. We don't include things like capital. It's not cash, it's not liquid. So we don't include that. It's just cash and current investments. And then we look at the next side of the balance sheet and start subtracting any of the liabilities. And you see on here, they have some externally restricted funds, internally restricted funds. You should have a note to that to say what it is or who the funder is. So subtract that, take the difference, and divide it straight over the total expenses on the revenue and expense statement or the income statement there. So it's pretty simple calculation. Excuse me, most people get a little bit tripped up with restricted funds. So if your board has restricted funds for a specific purpose, it's just really important to note it on the financial statements here. And it also helps if they include the minutes from the meeting where they restricted it so that we can see the date that they were restricted. The next financial policy is around program financial eligibility. And this is just that federal and provincial funding cannot exceed 75% of the total program cost. The remaining 25% has to come from the community somehow. Could be your registration fees, fundraising. Maybe you can get some other grants from local government or private funders, even just individual donors. You can also include in-kind contributions. So I've just included an example here to show you they would identify the government revenue sources on the top under revenue, add those up, including the community gaming grant, and then take the sum and divide it over the total expenses. And that's how they get that number. So the one neat thing about this rule is we do include in-kind contributions if you have them. So if for whatever reason you've got higher government funding, you can include your volunteer hours, any donated labor, professional labor, equipment, services, materials, things like that. You can add those up and include them on the financials, and they'll be considered. So what it does is it just increases your overall expenses too. So it shows more community benefit when it's valued there. If you do that, we just ask you I'll go back to the last slide, that you include it on the revenue and the expense both. So it cancels each other out, but it still increases your overall expenses. And you include like a summary, a little in-kind summary telling us how you got those numbers. So if it was volunteer labor, 10 volunteers, volunteered for 20 hours at $20 an hour, that kind of thing. So, and I'll quickly go through a little hot tips applying for the grant, and then we'll break and see if you guys want more, if you have questions. So just some tips and advice on how to apply. Always tell new applicants, look through the program guidelines really thoroughly. If you are an old hat and you apply every year, we have started including at the beginning of the document a what's new section, and it'll go over any of the changes for the guidelines. We just do an annual review every year, and we make small updates and clarifications. So you can go through that and it'll tell you what's changed since the last year, and it should even link to the section. Do definitely look at the pre-application checklist. Make sure that you're not missing any documents. We do have all of these example documents on our website if you're not sure how to put anything together. So like those financial statements I shared, there's example summary reports, there's example everything probably that you could use on there. If it's really complicated, you may want to have a professional review your financials. It is not a requirement. They don't have to be accountant prepared statements, but if you do get those made, please send them. Save all of your documents. I always say put them in a folder called like gaming application on your desktop. You can upload Word, PDF, and Excel, also JPEG, I think, type formats onto the application. So if you are coming in year to year, check your notification letter from the previous year and see if there's anything that you needed to address. Make sure that your gaming account summary reports are up to date. So that might be something that you see in the letter, or just double check to see if you sent it to us. You can contact the outreach manager, and I'll give my email at the end of this if you need any assistance with any kind of tricky issues you're not sure what to do. And I always say apply as early as possible because the applications are processed in the order received. This is just some screenshots about the actual online system because some people get a bit confused. It can lead you around in loops. We do have a tutorial as well, which I recommend, that shows screenshots. But you want to find where it says online service and use the launch online service button. And then from there, you want to just stay on the left side where it says apply online. These are actually the links to open up the online applications. We click on the community gaming grants. and that will open it up. There's a lot of information down the center panel here, and if you click on anything there, it'll just send you back to the beginning. So don't do it. Don't, just stay over here. And then if you are not happy with the outcome of your application, you do have the ability to request a reconsideration. So you can send that in within 30 days of getting your letter from us and tell us why you think the decision should be varied or overturned. We accept clarifying information. You can send documents. All of that is considered. If it was clearly missing or you just want to change something, then that's typically not. Final decision will be given to you within 90 days. I'm just going to pause it there and see if we have questions. One thing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat.
No.
No, you're just doing that good, Amy. So
all right.
I've
Well,
learned
do you have some more stuff about like how to spend the grant? Like once you get it, I don't know if anyone here has gotten a gaming grant and you're not sure about the spending rules, like what the eligible use of funds are or how to report. It's a little bit dry if you don't have the money. So I'll go over it if you guys want me to, but otherwise I'm not sure if it would be relevant.
I do have a question that's popped in. First aid and food safe and vocational. So I'm guessing that question, that's a question of would those be eligible expenses? So if a club wanted to run first aid or food safe for their members, is that something that they could apply for a grant for?
Yeah, so the first aid and the food safe, I think in the context of youth programming, that wouldn't really be considered vocational. Where it might be is if it was, say, like a not-for-profit cafe that was training their paid staff. So I'm not sure that these youth are getting that specifically so they can get a job. I think it's more of like life skills and skill building to do that enhancement section. So that's not really what it's, yeah, it would be fine.
Right. The next one is, how do you define board regarding voting, etc.? Is small 4-H clubs don't usually have a board.
Okay,
so they do have, and I don't work on the club level, so maybe somebody could speak up and tell us exactly how you're organized at the club level, because the youth do make up president, vice president, treasurer, etc.
Yeah, so a board is like in parent advisory councils, they call them the executive. And it's usually 4 or 5 people, like the president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, whoever is being accountable for the organization as a whole and who's going to have signing authority on the bank account, right? So those people are making broader decisions on a day-to-day basis for the organization as a whole.
Can I step in here? This is Heidi Van Geloof.
Yeah.
You betcha, Heidi.
Okay, so I'm the A leader of a local club in Kelowna. So our structure is that every year the members elect their executive. Okay, we do have a club constitution that was drafted using the format given to us by 4HBC, but the executives, so we elect a president, a vice president, treasurer, secretary, safety officer, and club reporter. Sometimes safety officer and club reporter is not filled depending on the willingness for club members. So we're not really, the members do not, because of their ages, they do not have legal signing authority on the bank account that we have because the banks do not permit it. So myself and our B leader have signing authority on the account. But we're not really elected. so that's the part that was also my question is, as a small club, are we actually eligible for the gaming grant based on that?
Well, I will say I've seen more councils apply than clubs. So
Yes,
that
and that was,
might be part of it. But yeah, I think that it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to have youth be signing authorities on the bank account. And I think in that case, would make sense to have someone appointed that has that authority. But are you deciding where the money goes, or is that youth executive kind of making that and then
it
telling
is
you
the,
what you can sign off on the checks for, right? Like, do they have any oversight of that or not?
they do. So typically when we are writing checks, it is, to cover things that's, for example, uniforms, location, rent, or, deposit to where we meet. So those sort of expenses, and they do, for the most part, the bigger decisions are made by the membership. They do vote on it. So the executive meets and they put forward, the proposal that it is approved for being paid out. Some of the stuff, the day-to-day, just little things, as leaders, we just pick them up as they're needed. And so then when we get reimbursed, the club does vote on that.
Yeah, so I don't see a problem with that. Like, to me, that seems fairly similar to another not-for-profit that might be delegating authority, to a staff member or to, a bookkeeper or somebody to do that work for them. But they're just delegating it to you because they don't actually have the authority to do the banking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they're
in
still
that
making
case,
the decisions.
would the leaders then who that's delegated to be considered part of the board?
Well, are you voting on things too?
We don't know.
No. So then, yeah, I don't know that you're part of the board.
Okay. So it just would be that core
Yeah,
executive
if you have
that
the power
members
to,
elect.
if you get to vote on things and if you have the power to make decisions, about the whole club, then I think that you could be considered to be on the executive or on the board.
Right.
If that power is just delegated to you and the board could say, no, we want someone else to take over now because you bought pink paper or something.
Yeah,
Right?
they don't have the power to get rid of leaders in that sense. They might sometimes want to, just because as leaders, we are the ones who register, and without having
Yeah.
registered
Oh, that
leaders,
is
the club
tricky.
doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think it would be, so is there like a group of the youth who are acting as the board then? For
Yeah,
providing more
they're the
leadership?
executive.
Yeah, I would just put them as the board. I think it's a little bit too muddy to include the leaders.
Okay.
Oh, the
So
leaders
that
like
was
a
really the
GM.
ultimate
Yeah.
question is, because of that structure, because it's not a board, our individual clubs, like our district in the past has applied and received the gaming grant, but are we as individual clubs eligible to apply?
Yeah. So I will say if your district is applying, if you're included in their application, you should talk to them because that's part of the direct deliveries. We want to make sure we're not funding the same activities twice. So we'll say, well, who's delivering this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that Erica said it good. The leader is like a GM. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Except they can't be fired.
Yeah.
Thanks, Heidi.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. So the next question here, I know that's probably going to be a confusing one that's going to hold people up, but Amy, what I was hearing is maybe people should go ahead and apply and see what happens, because it sounds like youth executives are a board.
Yeah.
Would qualify with leaders being assigned positions. Okay. Going back to the financial eligibility, do you need to qualify for both organization financial eligibility and program financial eligibility?
Yeah, so those are the two policies that are in force for it. So you do need to meet both. If you're like most of the 4-H I've seen that apply for one single program, and it's like that example where the one program is everything the organization does, it'll be the same set of documents anyway, unless you add in kind. So it's not additional paperwork, but you do need to meet both that financial need and the government funding limit applies. Does that answer it?
I'm going to say yes, because I was reading ahead, looking
Okay.
at other questions.
Okay.
But people can always speak up if it didn't answer that question. So I'm jumping ahead because some of the discussion on the chat was related to the previous question.
Okay.
But the next one I have here is in-kind volunteer hours. Does it need to be part of the annual year-end statement provided by the accountant? Or can it be written in the application as long as we keep a copy of the backup paperwork with recorded hours from all events?
Yeah, so it doesn't need to be included in accountant prepared statements. In fact, there's few accountants that will include it because it's difficult to verify. So a really good estimate of what that is, if you have things like volunteer logbooks that you have, definitely keep those records available, just in case you're ever asked. But yeah, you can just add it in. That's why I say if you're going to add it in, sometimes your program financials will look a bit different than your overall organizational financial statements, because you might want to do them up to add those lines in for the in-kind, or just send in a separate in-kind summary and show us how much has been added.
A couple other comments on bank accounts. So one leader says BMO allows at least one youth as a signer. And also another note that credit unions will allow youth to have signing authority on bank accounts. So that's message is basically going out to leaders there. Okay, touching base on the board rule. What if you have a small club and your voting members don't meet the requirements versus board members?
Yeah, so that is one that we're pretty sticky about, because having that double the number of the board is how you demonstrate a democratic process. So if you don't have that, then maybe think about cutting those board members down. And it's because the rules are in place for 5,000 applicants in all the different sectors, right?
And recruiting, I guess that means it's time to recruit some more members for your club.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, or if your club is really small and you're in an area where there's a lot of really small clubs, maybe get the council or the district to apply.
And someone else made the note that in terms and I'm thinking maybe they mean mentally here, but in terms of board, just substituting the word executive in the case of clubs would be more appropriate as people are working through their applications.
Yeah. Definitely. I think we updated our parent advisory council guidelines to say executive, because that's how they operate. But a lot of other not-for-profits do have boards, so.
Someone else comments the term executive is used in the Societies Act, not board. So yeah, so lots of conversation in the chat. If you haven't looked in there, go ahead and look in the chat at some of the roundabout conversation that's happening. Lots of good details. I don't see any other specific questions at that point. Maybe if you have a question now, unmute yourself and you can ask Amy a question if it's something relevant to what we've been talking about for the last half hour.
My question has to do with restricted funds. Oh my gosh. So for example, we have a 4-H food booth and we have items that are earmarked for equipment purchases to keep the food booth running, or for maintenance to repair items, etc. and then a budget to start up the food booth for the following year. So that would be considered restricted funds. You mentioned that there needs to be a reference of those restricted funds in minutes, but if that's something that's an ongoing thing and has been provided once, does it need to continually be added into the minutes to make sure that it's always there as an extra job?
Yeah, well, it depends on really how much it is, if it's going to impact your surplus calculation or not. If it's a really huge amount, that's when it's going to. If it's smaller, it probably won't. And I think about things like this, like should it be something that's restricted or just part of the budget? In terms of like thinking about your personal finances, like how much would you put aside to do regular maintenance on your car versus if you were saving to buy a new car, right? So one thing you might restrict the funds for, you're going to put them away and lock them away because you know my car is going to die within the next 2 years. So I've got to sock away money. The other one is like, I know I have to change my oil every so often. I know I'm going to need my brakes done. It's not really something that you're restricting the funds for. It's just built into your budget. I don't know
Okay,
if that helps.
it does help. For example, we had a fridge donated to us and I ended up with an $1,100 bill. So you want to have that maintenance money put aside because we didn't expect to get the fridge donated, nor did we expect that bill. And then equipment, if something dies and we actually have to go and purchase it. So I guess that's what I'm getting at to make sure that we're in compliance for applications.
Yeah, so if you think that you're going to need a replacement fridge in the next few years, start putting money away for it and you can restrict it for that purpose, right? For your food booth, for your equipment fund.
So
And you
what I
can-
mean, what I mean with that is, so we decided that, say, 3 years ago, last year, the year before, do we need to have that in minutes and put that in with the gaming application every single year? That's what I mean. Or can we use the minutes from 3 years ago where it was referenced and it hasn't happened yet, but it was talked with, it was dealt with and tabled?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a straightforward answer, which I'm sorry for, but it depends on how you do it. I've seen it where a certain amount of funds get restricted and locked away for a few years, or if you add to them every year. Sometimes if they get added to every year, like we don't know how much is in there in that restriction or how much has been added every year, unless it's say the same amount every year or something like that. Sometimes there's a treasurer's report, which is handy, and they just reference that and say, as per the treasurer's report, $200 was added to the equipment fund this year. And that's even good enough because we've seen it was restricted in the first year. And they can kind of follow and see how much is added. It gets a little bit tricky on our end if we see that, say, in 2020, you formed a restricted fund that was $5,000, but now in 2024, it's $25,000, and we don't know how it made that jump or when that money went in. Because see, we let them sit for, I think, up to 5 years before we even look at it again. So knowing when it was restricted is important.
So keep that as a note on the treasurer for report annually.
Yeah, or if you add a substantial amount, then show it in the minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, that couldn't be more painless. I've just seen so many examples of it done differently. We'll usually end up asking if we're not sure what's going on. We'll get a letter saying, can you explain your restricted funds? More chat here at the credit union. I did see someone in the chat, I think, said they might be interested in spending reports. So maybe I'll go back to that one. I've got the resources slide up right now, so I'll give it a minute if anybody wants to jot down any of those emails or phone numbers really quick. And then I'll go find the spending report. So we deposit all of the grant funds into a designated gaming account. We like it if you pay your expenses directly from here because it makes it really easy to report on. However, you can transfer funds either by check or electronically from your gaming account to your general account to reimburse you for any program costs you've already paid out of there. And you can do that, as I mentioned, by check or a board-approved EFT, and hang on to your invoices and receipts for up to 5 years. That is our timeline for doing an audit. The board-approved EFT is basically if you're going to be doing EFT and you don't have people signing off on the checks, is just to have a document saying like who the signing authorities are that they approve for a certain purpose and a certain amount for EFTs. So you could say, you know, what those purposes would be so that there's not someone else who can log in, say, to the bank thing and do it for unapproved purposes or over a certain amount. And then the reporting itself, you'll do it on what's called a gaming account summary report. This may look different in future years. We're working on trying to get an online version, but it's not a reality yet. So we have this paper document that looks like a tax form, but it's really not that bad. I'll go over it really quickly. So this is due within 90 days of your organization's fiscal year end. Whenever your year end is, you have 3 months to get this in. So we hope that that makes it easier that you're doing it with the rest of your financials. We're not able to send out a reminder at this time to everyone. What we're really looking for is to make sure all the different lines sort of add up. So you've got your opening balance, how much went in for the gaming grant, how much went out, and what was it spent on, and what is the closing balance. I'll just show you that. I've circled the parts that we look at very carefully. This opening balance, if you had a grant in the last year, this should be the same as your closing balance from the previous year, because the same amount carries year to year, right? So this one is March 31st is the year end. So on April 1st, they're going to have the same amount of money. Then you put here what your gaming grant was, how much went in. There is sections if you do licensed gaming here, but typically we don't look at that for grants. There's sections if you're getting like GST rebates, or if you sell like a large asset from gaming funds, or you get donations from service orgs, you can put things here, but if you don't, it might not be applicable. So right here is just where you add up opening balance and your grant. What do you start with? What came in equals. Really important. Then this is where you list all the things that you bought with your gaming funds and your total that went out. So we just go through with a calculator and make sure these all balance. This here is your closing balance. That's what it calculates as. Then we ask you to look at your bank statement and verify it. So put down, what does your bank account statement say? If those two don't line up, do a reconciliation and figure out why. Usually, if you've written a check and it hasn't gone through, is the most frequent case. And then there's just a place there for your officers to sign off. And that's it. I'll put that back up in case anyone didn't get it. Yep, that is all I've got. I've got this here with some resources. If you're in different areas around BC, we also partner with what's called community charitable gaming associations. They're all across the province as well. They're nonprofits that help community groups access gaming grants. So they will do presentations in their communities. They can also help you with your grant submission. So that's information on them. If you want to reach out and touch base with any of them, they'll be glad to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. I think that we're going to let you, Amy, get back on with your evening. It was so generous of you to give up of your time and to come and meet with us. I'm excited for the clubs, and I hope that you get quite a few applications from them. I guess they'll be busy in the next 30 days. So Thank you. So we'll let you, we'll
Great.
call an end to this meeting and let you get on with your evening.
Thanks very much for having me.